Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Blaze Podcast. Today, we have Emma, who has been a career data scientist and from the numbers perspective. And she lives in Singapore currently, but we'll know more what she does. The focus is to understand how we adopt AI into our daily businesses, how amazing it is to use AI, or not so amazing it is to use AI, and how should students and early professionals prepare themselves for the new world adopting to AI. And also, we'll touch upon some aspects of people who are wanting to become fractionals. What should they consider before they jump into the bandwagon? All right. So let's dive deep in. Hello, Emma. Welcome to my podcast.
Hi, Hari. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, our pleasure. I focus this podcast more from a learning perspective, not general conversations. There are n number of podcasts available, millions of podcasts available. But one trend, what I have noticed with all these podcasts is they call people who have been there, done that, right? And it doesn't resonate with any one of us, right? And when I started my journey onto podcasts, which is this year, January, uh, I wanted to focus on only people who are building things on their own, bootstrapped entrepreneurs, because 99.99% of the entrepreneurs are bootstrapped. You don't get a fund on the first day, right? And over the journey, I also realized the importance of being a fractional and how fractionals are making a change in how organizations adopt. I'll give you a small example. Yesterday, I was talking to somebody, saw an LinkedIn post somebody forwarded me, and they were looking for a CTO kind of a person, but with equity. And predominantly, I avoid these kind of organizations, but the idea really interested me because I understand the grassroots healthcare problems in India. And I just wanted to have a conversation. So I had a conversation, and this guy, he talked everything. And I suggested him, instead of an interview, why don't you give me a shot for 1 month and see how I'm understanding your idea? He said, exactly, I had that in mind, Hadi. I'm looking for somebody like a fractional. I said, I didn't use the word, but he used it. So people are understanding the value of what experience brings into picture. So given that context, I talk predominantly my podcast. If you see, all the editions are bootstrapped and people who are making a huge change to their life and people around them. And that's where my sweet spot is, because that's what will resonate with a lot of people rather than sitting and giving the gyan kind of a stuff. I've done this, I've done that, that kind of an aspect. All right. So Emma, that's a lot of me talking. Now it's up to you. What has been your journey like? Where did you start? How did you start? And how did you end up in Singapore?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey started, actually, I was really interested to get into the advertising industry and doing my postgrad back in Auckland, New Zealand. I wrote my thesis on advertising effectiveness. And that's when I realized I actually really enjoyed the insights and research side of the process. And that is really what that realization is what led me into a market insights career, starting with a small boutique consultancy in New Zealand, a really high performing team, working with clients to provide sort of management consultancy level guidance, but using research and data as the fact base for that. So we used to call ourselves a research-based consultancy. Through a journey of acquisitions of that small boutique as part of their exit strategy, becoming part of TNS and then Kantar purchasing TNS. So all up, I think I had 12 years with the New Zealand business, starting
Excellent.
as a consultant, crunching the data in SPSS and Excel. And then my last position there was in the senior leadership team as an executive director, still overseeing client accounts, but also responsible for commercial strategy, business development, and those sorts of things. So I really enjoyed that combination. The opportunity came then to say, hey, would you like to go and lead the Kantar TNS team up in Bangkok? And I thought, well, that's a fresh challenge, a new opportunity. I'd had some experience working with that office on joint projects before, and it was a great opportunity to come back up to Southeast Asia, as I've done all my high school years here in Singapore, so it was always close to my heart. It was a good opportunity to get up to this part of the world. So I took on that role, which was great, even after and we merged all the different Kantar brands under one. And then I took a short career break around during COVID. There was, obviously COVID was a bit of a crazy period.
Correct.
Kantar was doing some global restructuring as well. And I thought, what a good time to pause, reflect on, what I wanted out of my career and where things were going next. Spend some time with family, which was very difficult given the Australian and New Zealand border closures. So I did
Correct.
get in there quick. But I had a really good sort of 6 to 8 months, exploring different parts of Thailand, traveling, visiting family, helping some founders I knew in the blockchain space with some of my projects and their business. And then Singapore reached out again to say, hey, look, we have a new role that we'd like you to fulfill as head of client growth. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I decided that I would give a go towards independent consultancy. It had always been somewhere in the back of my mind. And it felt like a really good time after 18 years in the corporate side of things to explore that opportunity, whether that's on a project basis or on a fractional basis. So we don't see lots of fractional roles for market insights experts, but I'm hoping
Correct.
to change that because I think it's really important that organizations do have that role sitting somewhere in that business that helps put evidence at the basis of decision making, no matter where that evidence comes from. It could be from survey data, publicly available data, customer data, your own business data. It doesn't really quite matter to me where that data comes from, just as long as it has some value that can be extracted, and particularly, most importantly, actually, stitching all those different data sources together to say, hey, look, here are the insights. Let's now build strategy or plans on top of that. So that's how I've ended up in Singapore, incorporated my business here, managed to get myself a sponsored EP, which was a bit of a coup. It's not always easy for people to do. So yeah, it's been a few months now. I can't quite believe it's September, but yeah, so that's what I've been focusing on this year, is actually just really trying to get that off the ground, despite the economic challenges and the tight budgets that we
I know.
ourselves are dealing with. But I think that's actually where independent consultants and fractionals have a really important role to play, because we don't have the overheads of big agencies, big corporates. We've got the ability to be flexible. If you don't have the budget or the need for a full-time staff member, people like myself, people in the communities that we're in, of different fractionals and portfolio career interested people, can really sort of solve some needs in terms of those budgetary constraints that we find ourselves facing at the moment.
Excellent. Excellent. So I'll get the first part out. So somebody who wants to build a career, who's just starting off post their graduation or in the first few years of their career, somebody wants to specialize in understanding how to read or how to model data insights,
Mm.
right? What are the specific inputs can you give us with your experience?
Well, so based on my experience, I think there are a few things, sort of the hard skills and the soft skills. And I think the softer skills come from having a really deep passion and curiosity for exploring and understanding data. That also includes things like having good conception of what data is and where it comes from. Often when we talk about data, people automatically think of spreadsheets of numbers, but there are many forms of data. It could be social media comments, Google reviews, observations in the street. Perhaps, you go down to your local shopping mall or your local hawker centre, or take a walk through the CBD, observing, what the different ads are that you see, how people are behaving, what they're doing. So I think having that innate curiosity and ability to understand data can come from many different places is really key. On the quantitative side of things, having some statistical nous is really important. I'm a firm believer that something like stats should really be a part of almost everyone's learning, because every day we're reading outcomes of what ultimately probably has statistics behind it, whether it's news articles reporting on different trends and things. Having some understanding of how that works, I think, is really key. Understanding margins of error, understanding imperfections is really important. And I think that comes through really strongly with stats, as opposed to perhaps in maths and economics, we're looking for very direct relationships, not always thinking about those margins of error or why those margins of error might exist. And then, of course, it's about evolving your different skill set for the tools that sit on top of that. And of course, AI is the main one today. There's a lot of chatter around how AI makes it very difficult for students and early stage career professionals, because a lot of the jobs we might have started out doing are now being automated or replaced by AI, which, it could be problematic in the long term. What does the skill set or the experience of the workforce look like in 5, 10, 15 years' time? But it's about, I think, not being afraid to show interest in using the tools. It's something to be embraced as opposed to push back against. And also realizing that, in my experience, that's about using AI as a partner, a productivity tool and a thinking partner, as opposed to a replacement. One of the things I like to do during my day is to see how well AI could do my job. I'll give it a decent prompt. Prompting is important. I'm sure we'll come back to that. But giving it a decent prompt to see how well it can do the things I would normally do. And I've not yet really found examples where it can do absolutely everything I do. So it just proves that point that it will get you so far, or it will remove, the first 50% of a task, but it's still on you to bring context, experience, curiosity, all those things to solving the picture. So I think for those early stage career professionals, I think it's avoiding being fearful of this technology, but showing how you can embrace it to get things done. And also, as I say, a lot of the tasks that we might have started out doing in our careers now being automated. I think it's still important to understand what those tasks are, so you can still at least picture why AI was able to come and solve this. What is the workflow that this contributes to, as opposed to just blindly accepting that AI is there. I'm sure in 5, 10 years' time, we will get to a stage of more just blindly accepting that it is. But I think where we are in that AI journey now, we want to know why we're using AI and what we're using it for. So being able to demonstrate that, I think, is important. And in terms of applicability, I'm sure there are many people being interviewed today to be asked, how they are using AI in in their day. And I think one of the really important things here is, there can be a lot of pressure out there in the market to be proficient in all forms of AI and be able to do everything in AI. I think I saw a comment the other day, there's about 40,000 AI tools out there, right? And we're not
Correct.
going to be signing up to all of them or using all of them. And I think it's fine to be confident in that. You see a lot of things around, what brand of this are you using? It's kind of like being at school and competing on what kind of shoes you're wearing, right? Do my sneakers come from Kmart or Target or Walmart, or are they Nike, Reebok sort of thing? So you do see like a bit of, judgment, I suppose, subtle judgment around what brands of AI people are using. I think it's important to pick what works for you. For example, I'm very much wedded to ChatGPT, and I'm comfortable with that decision. I will dip in and out of other LLMs as needed, but I'm comfortable with that decision and where it gets me. The other really important aspect, I think, when you're adopting these technologies is making sure you've got use cases. And this is no different to how I solve problems from a market insight perspective. We don't sit there and go, what tools can we use to do something? We ask, what is it we need to do? It's outcome focused. What is the goal here? Maybe my client comes to me and says, we want to do a bunch of interviews. And I say, let's put aside how we get the information from you. What are you solving for? I need to reverse market share declines in my category. I need to figure out what to make my brand stand for. So it's always much better to start with the outcome you require or the use case, and then you can figure out which tools are to use it. So that would be my advice when answering that question about how you're using AI, is to focus on the use cases that you're using it for, and realizing that AI is the tool that gets you there, but it's not. AI itself isn't the solution, if you like.
Correct. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this series, and my post came out that day, The Dark Side of AI. Very unfortunately, people, with great power comes great responsibility, right? These AI founders who have become big, right? Unexpectedly, I mean, I would say right time at the right place for various testing purposes and things like that. So I keep one phone on personal on iOS and the second one on Android. The big conversation which comes is, look at Apple. it didn't do anything with AI. Google is doing Gemini, right? Why is not anybody talking about Microsoft? So Microsoft Copilot works in its ecosystem, right? Gemini works in its ecosystem. Apple works in its own ecosystem. The tools like ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, all these are independent. Now, for me, if I look at it, predominantly everybody has replaced Google search with ChatGPT rather than asking what they want to ask. The last conversation I was having, the art of questioning, right? So, what was the longest time did ChatGPT think to give you an answer?
Oh gosh, I really tried. Oh, it might have been almost a year ago. I had some data, and again, it was a good example of how well can AI do the tasks that I would not do as a human. Yeah, I reached that limits of the context window with that
Correct.
task. It started to sort of, fall over a bit. It almost felt like, to humanize it a bit, it felt like it was getting a bit passive aggressive and lazy. And then we were just getting to cycles of, things were taking minutes. And then I would get the outputs and the instructions wouldn't have been followed and things like that. Yeah, I reckon, probably a good half an hour, but also sometimes I don't have the patience to wait that long.
Wait.
Oftentimes it's my signal to go, is the AI actually going deeper than what I need? I actually didn't need an answer that was going to take, half an hour to germinate on. I was looking for the 5-minute version, which is great now with ChatGPT 5, being able to set that, is it the quick task or the deep thinking task as
Correct.
well. Now, I've definitely exhausted it to its limits with some tasks.
Excellent.
But now, for most things that I'm doing with a well-crafted prompt, and some of my prompts are 1 to 2 pages in a Word document, right? This is not like, as much as many people, particularly the general mainstream public, will be using ChatGPT or others in the same way as they would type in Google search. I'm developing prompts that are, 1 to 2 pages long to pop in there. And I sort of think that helps it will do a little bit of thinking time, but it's not taking as long as it was when I was trying to really put it to the test last year. So it's great, and it's great to see it evolve every day. Almost every day you wake up to some new development in AI, right? Yeah. So the power is incredible.
For one of my simple questions, I was not even giving data. For simple questions, the max is like 5 minutes and 50 seconds it was thinking. So that tells me that ChatGPT, the people who are interacting with the AI tools are not interacting with the intent of learning or asking the right questions. People just want ready made answers, right?
Yeah.
That is not what AI tools are.
Yeah.
Whenever people tell, this company is laying off so many people, this company people are laying off so many people because of AI, the stupid media blows it up. Right? What nobody understands is it's not AI. AI will never replace a developer for various reasons. It will give you the algorithm, which Google was doing since 20 years. You go to Google and search, give me a algorithm for this problem. It'll give you the algorithm done. Somebody has written it, it'll pick it up and show it to you. Your job is done. Here, the interface has just changed. So what Google does, it goes and searches if Emma has solved this problem and she's put it online. So it'll show the result to me. But the agent will not show me Emma's webpage. Instead, it'll tell, I have given you this answer.
Yes.
Right? So it's a very, is it ethical? I don't know. Is it non-ethical? I don't know. But I feel even the AI agents, when they're answering questions, they should tell you source of references are. Yes, ChatGPT at times will give you references. Perplexity will give you references. It should give you the references. This is from a thesis paper submitted by Emma or whatever it is, so that we know that, hey, there's somebody who solved my problem. Why don't I connect and talk to them and understand what it is? Right. This is where my focus is when I talk to people and say AI is not there at all in terms of anything. They look at me and like, dude, do you really understand AI? Well, like, okay, that's okay. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. But it's a long way to go. Emma, since you have interacted with ChatGPT quite a bit in terms of crunching the numbers and data, when you ask the AI tool for certain things, is it because of your personal learnings and knowledge? Did you know how to ask? Or you asked a generic question and started drilling down with the responses what the AI agent has given, just to understand how the interaction works for you?
Yeah, I would say more the former. So at the beginning of this year, through different networking groups, I became aware of some great AI learning courses. And that was really instrumental to setting the scene for how I would use AI in my business going forward. Before, yeah, so sometimes I put in a query into ChatGPT like it would be a Google search. Maybe it's just for something like, hey, look, I badly burned my hand in the kitchen a few months ago. Now I could
Okay,
go Google search and do that, but I'm going to get bombarded with sponsored links before I get the
got
information
it.
I need. So ChatGPT gives me a great summary of what to do for this type of burn. Okay, cool. So that's very simple. But I know for things in my business that I want to do, like if I'm preparing a proposal for a client, or if I'm going through, let's say, a bunch of qualitative data where I've got loads of different comments from people and I need to get to the key themes, I don't just say things like, here's all the data I've collected, tell me what the key themes are. It's this, and this is where my 1 to 2 page prompts, might come into it. I say who I am. I say the task I'm doing, the purpose of the task, who's going to use the outputs of the task to do
True.
what. Here are the different parameters I would like you to work within. It's also just as important to tell, I think, in a prompt what not to do as well as what to do. We often forget that sort of other half in life, that we often focus on the yin, for example, but forget about the yang. So it can be, what do you like, but actually what don't you like is just as insightful. And same thing with ChatGPT. Please focus on this. Please don't do this.
Correct.
Um, and yeah, the better you get those prompts, the better outcomes you'll get. And sort of case in point, a week or so ago, I was working on a work task where I was LLM to look for themes and some data I'd collected. And my first attempt at it was quite a quick one, and it gave me a fairly templated response. It was workable, but actually I was like, no, this is a bit too templated for what I wanted. So I went back in, re-prompted in a different way. And I actually went more iterative at that time. It's like, right, let's look at these things one at a time. And then I also find myself repeating instructions just to be sure. Remember how I said do this and don't do this, and remember how I told you the output I wanted was in a table form with this, that, and the other. And I got a much richer result that way. So it's definitely a time saver because, before with thematic analysis, I still remember days back at university or an early stage of my career where you're printing off transcripts, using a highlighter, cutting them up, sticking them on the wall in different themes. I don't have to do that anymore. AI can do that for me, which is great, but I still have to come up with the thinking on top. What does this
Correct.
mean? Does it make sense? Will the client find this information actionable? So all of that still comes. So it just helps me to get there faster. But I think for anyone thinking that, AI will just allow me to do this in 5 minutes, absolutely not. You could still spend a good couple of hours doing that. It's still faster than the traditional way, but you could still spend half a day doing that. LinkedIn's also another common example. We see a lot of comment on whether you've used LinkedIn to
Correct.
craft your LinkedIn
Ah,
post.
yeah.
And, I absolutely do because it helps me to be concise. If I've got a lot of ideas in my head and I don't want it to be very long, I take AI's help to do that. But I found myself the other day probably spending about 2 to 3 hours just on a LinkedIn post to get it right and to go back and say, hey, no, I don't like this part, or no, please, you've skipped a couple of lines that I really want to be in there. Even things like creating an accompanying image. So with images, I tend to go to stock websites. Sometimes I go through my own camera roll. If I can't find something that I want, and I find stock imagery quite poor for reflecting people in this part of the world, I can then go to somewhere like Midjourney to then create a photo for my accompanying post. And all that can take time. I think it also depends on how perfect do you want something to be. Are you happy with 80% or do you want to get closer to 100%? Because, yeah, the closer you want to 100% or even above, the more time it's going to take to use AI to get there as well. So I think that's
Sure.
important to remember. Same with, establishing my own website. I gave it a go using some of the tools like Lovable and things that are out there to create these prompts. And then I sort of realized that this is going to give me a web page short. Is it going to be a web page, the one that I actually wanted? I was like, no, it's probably going to take me a week to sit here and get it to my standards. Now, maybe my standards are a little bit too high. That's perfectly valid as well. But it became that case between I could do this for a week, but that takes a week out of my other business activities, or I can actually go to a website designer who knows how to do
And
this
get it done.
quickly, who's still using AI tools, but that's their gig. That
Correct.
would be a better use for the amount that costs, for the time it would take me. It would be a better use of giving it to that expert, because AI doesn't make any of us experts in other fields.
Correct.
Right? It makes me no more a rocket scientist than it makes a rocket scientist a qualitative research
Correct.
expert, right? So, and that I think really speaks to the importance of context and experience as well, which is what comes through in a really well-crafted prompt. And to that end, I would say, back to your question about advice for early stage professionals and students, still being able to demonstrate those critical thinking skills. So that you're not blindly taking outputs, but you know how to read them, interpret them, critique them, and improve them, so you get sharper prompts and better outcomes.
Right. So this is where it is, right? People are getting carried away, right? I'm part of a lot of product management groups in India, in APAC, in Australia. Everybody is like, how do I use AI in product management? How do I use AI into this? People have a lot of questions, but I think for me personally, if you are good at your subject, you know how to use a tool. So it is like me trying to understand how to fly an aeroplane. I didn't even do a test commercial pilot license. I never sat in a single seater aircraft. I never sat in commercial flight when I'm flying. So when I look at all these things, now if I start asking ChatGPT, or if I go to the Airbus A380 pilot and say, hey, what is there? I saw ChatGPT. You have to switch off those switches. Everything will be fine. Right? It doesn't make sense what I'm talking as. If I knew how to fly a single seater, a dual seater, a four seater, a single engine, a dual engine, a four engine aircraft, then the other person I can have a conversation with in terms of my subject. If I have not done that and starting to look at how I can incorporate pilot skills who flies a A380, doesn't make any sense to anybody who's using it, right?
Right.
So that is where I predominantly talk about. If you are very good at your subject, AI is not going to take away anything, but it's going to complement, as you exactly said. I've been a developer, I've been a tester, I've been a consultant all through my career. So I wanted to design my website using, not Lovable. Lovable I tried, Cursor I tried, VO I tried, everything, V0 I tried. But let me tell you, Emma, it is designed as per prompts and you pay for the prompts. That is expensive, which is happening. You and I don't know the right questions to ask from a design perspective.
Correct. Yeah.
Hosting that is a very different paradigm altogether. You need to connect it to GitHub and GitHub to your service provider. Don't tell me about these cursors and lovables. You can do that on Canva itself for $10 a month. Right? Put your colors, play with the colors, go to a web designer and say, dude, I need this, please give it to me. Or go to Claude or ChatGPT and give this thing the design and say, use these colors. This is the text I want. Job done. Take it, go ahead and host it. So this is where I feel the whole conversation of AI is misleading people. And that is the reason I wanted to do these conversations, to understand if I'm thinking correct, if I'm not thinking correct, or from perspectives of various peoples in their fields, so that it helps more people to understand or partner with the AI tools to get better.
Yeah, I think what you touch on there is something I think about a lot, in that my concern with AI is that it's actually encouraging people to take on tasks that they wouldn't normally do, that they're not an
Okay,
expert in, because they're saying, oh, actually, I've never built a website before, but I can now use a tool to do that, even though I don't
correct,
know to prompt to do it. It's going to save me $2,000, let's say, from our landing page, and I'll do it myself. And it's like, but actually, what is your day job? Because I'm sure it's obviously not web designer. So it's almost a bit of a fallacy that people think, oh, AI, I can do it myself with AI. But I'm like, well, if it's not part of your actual skill set anyway, how many tasks are you taking on that you shouldn't be doing? Just because AI can now do them. I still think, let's all just use AI in our area of expertise, rather than falling into that trap of thinking we can do so many more things now that we have AI. It's true to an extent, but if you're wanting to get to the levels, that we're all used to, AI doesn't just mean I'll save money by outsourcing it, do it myself. That's probably taking you away from another task. Give the task to the expert who knows how to do it. Let them
correct,
use AI to make themselves more productive, to bring the
correct,
cost of that exercise down, but you remain focused on what your core task and job is at hand.
perfect. Emma, so you specialize in data insights
Mm.
oriented business strategy, right? Now, let's take your and my example. Let's not invent new examples. So we are fractionals, right? You focus on data insights, business management or business strategy. I look at product strategy, right? In layman terms, this is for the fractionals, 20 plus years who are going to get into the world of fractionals. How do I first of all understand what data I need?
Mm.
Question number one. How should I read the data and how should I structure my data so that my approach to my sales is going to be impactful?
Gosh.
We can take our examples.
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. And it can often be convoluted, I suppose, by all the different tools that are out there that are available to use to do this, and whether those tools can speak to each other through APIs and all the rest of it. Which is why, to be honest, there are some things I still just like to do in Excel.
Correct.
Because Excel's still very powerful, and I mean you can make Excel look like a separate piece of software if you're really that keen on it. But in terms of for me, my business is quite simple, right? I don't have huge volumes of data I need to rely on. I could start using systems like HubSpot and things like that to look at my, as my CRM management and things, but I don't feel I'm at that stage yet
Correct.
for my kind of business where I'm selling my time. But in terms of thinking about, there are different ways we could use data here. One, it's been to understand the market and look at what the opportunity is, which will largely come from some kind of secondary or desk research, maybe even taking the help of AI. You may be in a position that you have the budget to actually go out and do some primary research to understand the market. But if you're an independent and a fractional, I'm guessing that that's probably slim chances. So you'll be
Correct.
relying on secondary data. And then I think, from there, assessing what the opportunities are. And then it really becomes more about, having your own kind of CRM to look at what your pipeline is. How many conversations are you having? How many are warm? How many are cold? Who do you come back to in 6 months' time as opposed to 4 weeks' time? And things like that. And I think, for me, that's quite straightforward to do. I'm really, something that I am trying to block out is just there's so much noise out there about you must be using all these tools and collecting this kind of data. You can, it is very possible to collect data you don't need. Sometimes there's too much data. We don't actually need to collect anymore. We just need to make sense of the data that we've already got. And for me, it's, when I first set up my business, you can imagine every time I opened the internet or social media, LinkedIn or whatever, it was just bombardment of B2B advertising to the point where it was just like, this is actually overwhelming. Stop. Because even if I'd go to Facebook or Instagram for a break to catch up with my friends, it's still B2B advertising saying you need all of this data. You need to manage this kind of data. You need to have this platform and talking to this platform. But really, I think, is independent consultants and fractionals. It's much more straightforward than that. Resisting that urge to subscribe to all those things to collect all that data, I think, is quite important. That said, there is room for experimentation with those tools insofar as many of us will be in fractional roles where our clients are using those sorts of tools. So for
Correct.
me, I still want to understand how, and I've used them before in corporate life, but how some of these tools like HubSpot and things work and what the potential is because my clients will be using those. But for me personally, I think it's being wary about, not taking a sledgehammer to a nut because it is very easy to get sucked into that vortex. And you only kind of really know how deep you are when you're looking at your credit card statement and going, gosh,
Correct.
I subscribe to a lot of things that I haven't used in the last 4
True.
weeks. Yeah.
True. Emma, what tools do you use for your data collection when you do your data insights? What are some of the tools you use and what do we get out of that?
Yep, absolutely. So there are a number of different ways that would, let's start with an online survey, for instance. So online surveys form a good chunk of the market insights projects that I've worked on over the years, and I expect that will always be the case. If we're doing an online survey of a particular audience out there in the public, I'll engage with a panel provider partner who specialize in creating and curating panels of people that meet the characteristics of people I want to complete my survey. So, for example, people in the 6 different Southeast Asian markets that drink soft drinks at least once a day, that kind of audience. So I work with my panel provider to say, hey, that's who I need to survey, and they will take care of that part. It's, those are the ones with the specialty and the expertise. If it is, for example, a type of survey where actually you're wanting to interview your own customers, it becomes very different. You could do that through a simple email send out, or, perhaps you're working with a platform like Qualtrics or Medallia or Question Pro or InMoment or something like this. So you're working with a tech partner who's using the technology to send out those survey invitations, collect the data, and then all the information comes back into a dashboard there. So I, as a consultant, don't want to get deep into that side of things because it'll take me down to an area, to my point before, it'll drag me into an area of expertise that I know about, but is not my bread and butter and not my reason for existing. So I've built up a network of partners in that space that help that. Same with things like qualitative research. We can do the interviews ourselves, but we would engage specialist recruitment agencies to say, okay, I need to speak to 20 of this kind of person in the Singapore market. Let's say, wealthy and high net worth individuals is a good example. That's been flavor of the day for a while now. I need to talk to 20 high net worth individuals about their banking and finance needs in
Mhm.
Singapore. And so we'd use specialist recruitment agencies to find those people. We would then conduct the interviews with those people and analyze the data from there. So there is a whole operations piece that sits underneath it. And
Excellent.
yeah, just building out a network of solid partners that you can rely on whenever you need that support. And the great thing is now a lot of those providers are adopting a lot of AI and automation technologies that are making the process so much simpler. I think the market research industry has possibly been slower than most industries in terms of tech
Correct.
adoption over the last 20 years. You're doing very discrete, separate tasks, and you're thinking, where is my one piece of software where I can just all do this within a portal? And that
Correct.
now exists, which is fantastic
Very
because
good.
it means I can spend less of my time working on operational stuff or engaging with others on operational stuff and focus much more on the strategic value of the information I'm getting, which is my reason for being. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Emma, okay, let me reverse this question. If you were starting your career today, you just finished education last month and you are out in the new world, what are 3 top things you would do different what you did 20 years ago?
What? I'm going to be honest and say I don't think I would have done anything different than what I did 20 years ago. And I'll tell you why. Once I had finished my postgraduate, I took a couple of months off as a bit of a breather and a relaxation time. But I knew what it was I wanted to do. I had come across a company during my time in postgraduate who'd come and spoken at one of our lectures. And I thought, that's exactly what I want to do. So a couple of months of decompression after finishing my thesis, I saw that these guys were advertising for exactly the role I wanted. So I'm making sure I get that role. So I contact them to say, hey, look, I remember you coming in and talking to in our lecture. I emailed my lecturer who was close to these people to say I really would like to get this role. And then I was also speaking to the recruitment agent for that role. And I just doubled down on those relationships
Excellent.
and hard. And do you know what? I would do the same thing again. I think if you are looking for roles, and I was in this position last year, a lot has changed since then. I think I've interviewed for a role that was the one role I've interviewed for in my life, and it was only sort of 20 years later I was back in the interview
Excellent.
process again. But what I've really noticed during that period is, yes, there is all this technology and there's AI and writing CVs and trying to get through ATS systems and all the rest of it, which actually almost makes the haystack bigger, right? It's harder to cut through. And I think that really highlights the importance of building interpersonal relationships with different employers, with different mentors, people in your network. I know you read a lot of information about that generation now not really wanting to engage, being quite happy to work from home or being behind a computer. And I would say that that's probably my hypothesis is that is a mistake. I think it's, use all those tools that are available to you, but building those interpersonal connections is still going to be really, really important for people to get a flavor of you. Networking
Correct.
has always been important throughout human history. It just
Correct.
changes
Correct.
shape and it has different influences upon it. But
Correct.
despite the world we live in now with all the information available to us, that actually makes a very noisy environment and harder to cut through. You'll see many applicants for jobs. And so finding different ways of building awareness of who you are as a person within your networks. So deepen your networks, but also try and find ways to expand your networks to enable you to have that voice and stand out from the rest.
Perfect. So when we graduated, I'm putting us all in the same years, the kind of tools what we have today don't exist, right? So I picked up software engineering, you picked up data science, various fields. What is something you would do or learn today before you start your career as a data scientist?
What would I be focusing on? I'd be going and trying to understand what the different tools are that people
Okay.
are using to look at and analyze their data. The reason I say that is you do see on a lot of job descriptions and role requirements references to specific brand names of tools and products, which I have mixed opinions on, but that's for another day. I think it's still important. The skill set should remain most important rather than the brand. But I think actually being going out there and able to understand what are the different ways people collect data, the different ways people store data, the different ways they analyze data, and the different ways in which they report back to that data. And if you can come back with a view on awareness and understanding of those, I don't think it's reasonable to request that someone must have experience with all of those things. That doesn't make sense to me. But having an awareness of what the different tools and approaches are in the industry, I think would be a really good starting point. So that when you're going in and starting a new job, you're familiar with the brand names of things and the concepts behind them. For me, when I first started out, my main tools were Excel and SPSS,
Correct.
which is IBM's statistics software program.
Right.
But now it's you've requests for Q and SQL and Python and all the rest of it. And I think if you're adept at understanding programming languages, you'll probably be able to, I can't write Python code, but I can look at it and I can see what each step is aimed at and trying to do because I'm used to working with SPSS syntax code. But having that awareness of the different tools available, I see a lot in my field in marketing. I see a lot of requests for different types of CRM tools is another good one. So knowing, your HubSpot from your Salesforce and all the rest of it is just getting to know the landscape of what is out there, what tools your clients are using. Again, coming back to what I was saying before, I still try to do that myself as an independent consultant because even if I'm not using the tools, I'm not big enough there. It's a sledgehammer to a nut for someone like me. I like to be familiar with what my clients would be using in market.
Excellent. Excellent. How do you like Singapore when compared to home?
It's a real yin and yang. I love the climate, of course. It's nice getting home for a little winter break, but
Correct.
I definitely don't miss, the endless months of rain and storms and things like that. So being in
Right.
this climate is wonderful. But yeah, I do like to go home and have a chance to put on my warm winter clothes. The food in this part of the world is great, obviously.
And
Even though Singapore is, a reasonably expensive place to live, it's still nice that you can go down to your local hawker centre or local HDB and still pay a couple of dollars for a good lunch and all the rest of it. So yeah, Singapore is a great part of the world to be. It's very central. It's a great time
correct.
zone doing work as
Correct.
well.
Correct. Correct.
Much favourable time zone than Auckland, where there was a lot of very early starts or very late nights. Being a small country at the arse end of the world, if you like. No, and the accessibility to other markets in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, Indo, Vietnam, Philippines. Singapore makes it really well positioned. I spend a lot of time in Bangkok and hope to spend more time there as well. And that's another great market to, it's very different from Singapore. Singapore is the big urban financial hub. And when I feel like a taste of a bit more creativity and whatnot, I'll spend some more time in Bangkok and things. So it's really nice to have access to a range of different experiences in this part of the world.
Excellent. Emma, before we conclude, what is one suggestion or recommendation would you give for somebody who's wanting to switch careers and opt for portfolio careers or become a fractional? What is one advice you have?
I would go back to my point about networking, and I would find communities that you can join of people undertaking that journey. So from my experience, and how we came to know each other through portfolio careers in Asia, which is something a friend had put me onto. I'd been thinking, I didn't know the word fractional, but I kept thinking I would love it if there were opportunities to, go in and support businesses in that way. Perhaps you have 3 to 4 ongoing clients that you work with. And then my friend introduced me to this concept where I was like, oh gosh, there are entire communities here
Excellent.
of people that already exist. And that has been the single best thing for me to understand the fractional journey, what it would look like. The network that we're in is so incredibly helpful. There's so much experience that is being shared and that is available to be shared. And we often joke about there's not a question that no one has been able to answer yet. And that is how I have been sort of plotting this journey between portfolio careers in Asia and a couple of other networks where I'm like, okay, there's a decentralized talent network I'm in called the Carrot Collective, which is a lot of ex-agency people, brand advertising, digital market insights. And it's great finding those people because that's where you'll find people with who are like-minded, share some of the same values, some of the same sense of purpose. If we want to be fractionals, often we're guided by the same motivations for that. So I think seeking out those networks and to find that support and then go for coffees with those people, chat with people on the journey. I've been doing that for the past 12 months. I had a really great coffee chat this week, actually, with another fractional CMO because I really wanted to understand their journey better. We see a lot of chatter about CTOs, COOs, CFOs, CHROs. But for me, I'm like, I really want to spend some more time with the fractional CMOs in the group because my role will ultimately be a subset of the marketing
See,
marketing business unit. And I think that's the best way. We've got all this technology. We can talk to ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude, or we can do Google searches, but nothing is quite a replacement for actually finding those
correct.
real life people and
Correct.
having those connections and making sure as well you speak to a range of different people. There'll be some who are very pro a certain style and others who have a very antithetical view to that. And I try to expose myself to both so I can sort of assess the pros and cons of different approaches. And even just this week after one of the coffee chats, I sat there and thought, okay, on the basis of that, I'm now going to give myself permission to approach a few things a little differently to see how that might help me on my journey. So yeah, the networking part and finding those hubs and communities, of which there are so many in Singapore, is another great thing about being here. That would be my top piece of advice. Talk to people who are doing the roles that you would like to get into. And even consider if you've got the financial resources and time to do so, what a late stage internship might look like. If you were able to
True.
go business for 3 months to learn, which is something I'm considering, what actually might that look like in terms of giving you a new set of skills while being able to show people the capabilities and expertise you do have?
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Emma, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I mean, that's been quite insightful in terms of learning from a student perspective or from a fractional perspective. I mean, I have way too more questions, but I will keep it short because I want more people to watch it to understand what the real world is
Mm.
rather than the social media and the advertisements and the media, what talks about the AI and everything. So I would keep it short and sweet for people to get more out of it rather than this thing.
Absolutely.
But we'll continue the conversations. That's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for taking time for us.
Thank you so much, Hari. It was a pleasure.
Anytime, Emma, anytime.